Thank you for being with us today for the statewide media briefing on the proposed new maximum contaminant level standards for PFAS chemicals in drinking water that the EPA announced on Tuesday. My name is Ron Aiken, and I'm the Media Relations Director for DHEC. Today's briefing will feature 3 agency experts to talk about this important subject, beginning with Environmental Affairs Director Myra Reese, followed by Bureau of Water Chief Jennifer Hughes and Bureau of Water Division Director Doug Kynard. Following their comments, we'll answer pre-submitted media questions, then open it up for your questions. Myra, good afternoon and welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ron, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for joining us today, and I also want to thank you for your assistance about 3 weeks ago when we asked for your partnership in helping us share information about EPA's upcoming action to limit PFAS chemicals in drinking water. And so today we're excited to kind of give you some initial thoughts on EPA's proposed rule. And along with our presenters, I want, see this as an opportunity for the media to really get to know the subject matter experts that we have here at DHEC.
I can't get the link to work. I'm trying to do a phone, but...
Go ahead, Myra. We muted them.
Okay, thank you. So along with our presenters, we have some of our subject matter experts that are here to assist with answering any questions that you have. So I'll just ask them to briefly turn their camera on so the audience can see them. But first, starting with Rob Devlin, who is our Assistant Bureau Chief. Actually, that's Fran Marshall. Right. So I'll start with Fran. And I think Fran joined us last time. Fran Marshall is our Director of Environmental Public Health. Thank you, Fran. And then we'll go to you, Rob. Rob Devlin, who is our Assistant Bureau Chief in the Water Program with Jennifer. And then also Sandra Snyder, who joined us last time. And Sandra is our unregulated compound specialist. So thank all of you for all of the hard work that you do every day in this issue and so many other issues involving environmental protection and public health protection in South Carolina. And we look forward to this discussion today. So, since EPA's release of their proposed enforceable standard a couple of days ago, we have started our review of the proposed rule, and we're participating in several additional briefings with EPA. And we have lots of questions, and EPA has gone to a lot of effort to put together documents for us and for the general public and for the media as well. So I hope you have access to those documents, and if you don't, you let us know, and we certainly will provide that information to you. We also are trying to invest a lot of time in our website, having some dedicated web pages. In particular, there's one that's called Media Briefings, where you can, it's kind of a one-stop shop that you can go to find the library where we will continue to provide these briefings. I envision us having continued conversations and touch points approximately probably every 3 weeks for many, many months. And we just really appreciate your interest and your willingness to partner with us. So I do want to say that, and I think we hit on this a little bit with our first briefing, but this is definitely one of the most complex and challenging issues that states have been faced with. And one thing that you will find when you start hearing some feedback from states is although this proposed national enforceable standard impacts all of the states and gives us kind of a roadmap or a level that we can compare our data to, you're going to notice right away that the impacts vary from state to state. And there are reasons why in certain states there are much higher levels of PFAS chemicals. Some states may have had manufacturers of these chemicals located in their states. North Carolina with the facility there is a great example. And then you're going to hear some of the data that we currently have. And then even within South Carolina, we know that we're going to see, I guess, some of the levels that we detect in our surface waters, our lakes and streams, and also in drinking water vary for one reason or another across the state, but we are detecting these chemicals everywhere. And so I do want to say that we are very proud of the hard work and the effort that our team has invested in sampling our water systems. We have a very robust set of data, and of importance to us is that we're testing all of our community systems. We're not leaving any community behind, including our communities who are served by very small systems and communities across the state that rely on private wells. And so with that, I want to go ahead and turn it over to Jennifer, and then we'll actually dig into the data. Doug Kiner will be, I think he has some slides and some visuals to share with you, and I think you will be surprised to see some of the levels that we're seeing in South Carolina are not too far off from even this proposed standard that we're faced with. So Jennifer, if you'll take it from here.
Thank you, Myra. I'm Jennifer Hughes. I am the chief with the Bureau of Water, and I would like to share with you that on March the 14th, 2023, earlier this week, EPA announced the proposed national primary drinking water regulation for 6 PFOS, including PFOA, PFOS, PFNA, PFHXS, PFBS, and Gen X chemicals. It is important to note that the proposed PFOS National Primary Drinking Water Regulation does not require any actions until it is finalized. EPA says they anticipate finalizing the regulation by the end of 2023. EPA's proposal would establish legally enforceable levels called maximum contaminant levels, or MCLs, for those 6 PFOS compounds in drinking water. The proposal, if finalized as is, would regulate PFOA and PFOS as individual contaminants, with the MCL being proposed at 4 parts per trillion. 4 parts per trillion is the lowest level that can be reliably measured. The other 4, PFNA, PFHXS, PFBS, and the Gen X chemicals would be regulated as a mixture. So for these PFOS compounds, water systems would use a hazard index calculation, which is defined in the proposed rule, to determine the combined levels of these PFOS pose a potential risk. The hazard index for these 4 PFOS compounds is proposed at 1. If not finalized, the proposed regulation would require public water systems to monitor for these chemicals. It would also require systems to notify the public and reduce PFOS contamination if levels exceed the proposed regulatory standard. DHEC is extremely supportive of EPA establishing drinking water standards to address PFOS. We feel EPA has taken a very important step by proposing MCLs for these 6 PFOS compounds. Their action gives states and drinking water systems the much-needed consistency for addressing PFOS in drinking water. DHEC is committed to ensuring we provide the regulatory oversight to public drinking water systems in our state to ensure the citizens of South Carolina are receiving safe drinking water. Now starts the public review and comment process that will take place over the next several months. We expect it to be a very robust process with a lot of interest and input from a diverse group of stakeholders. EPA is hosting 2 informational public webinars. In these webinars, EPA will provide information and an overview of the rule proposal, as well as details on how the public can provide their comments. The 2 webinars will be similar, but each will be targeted for specific audiences. The first webinar is actually being held today at 2 o'clock and will provide a general public overview of the rule proposal. And then the second webinar will be held on March the 28th, beginning at 2 o'clock, and it is intended for more technical audiences, including drinking water utilities, drinking water primacy agencies, and other drinking water professionals. Both webinar recordings and presentation materials will be made available following the webinars on the EPA's website. And their website is listed in the media briefing handout we gave y'all. EPA will also be holding a public hearing on May the 4th, where members of the public can register to attend and provide their verbal comments to EPA on the rule proposal. More information on the public hearing, including registration, is available on EPA's website. EPA will accept written comments on the proposed rule for 60 days after it is published in the Federal Register. It is expected to be published by next week. At the end of the comment period, EPA must consider the comments and publish their responses in the Federal Register. Once the EPA finalizes the rulemaking process and final MCLs are issued, there is typically a 3-year period before the new standards go into effect. Keep in mind, drinking water is estimated by EPA to represent only 20% of our overall exposure to these chemicals. Also important to understand that these proposed MCLs for PFOS represent chronic or long-term health hazards and assumes that a person drinks 2.5 liters of impacted water a day, 365 days per year, for 70 years. Please know that DHEC is committed to working with the EPA, with our drinking water systems, to address PFOS and to implement solutions to reduce human health risk. While EPA's recent announcement addresses PFOS in public drinking water systems, DHEC has implemented several PFOS strategies to collect data in order to gain a better understanding of where these chemicals are found and to work to reduce the amount of them that are getting into both surface water and groundwater that is used for drinking water. We want to emphasize the importance of the proposed standards in prioritizing private wells and our work with private well owners across the state. In South Carolina, approximately 1 million private wells serve our citizens. Our private well strategy focuses on wells that are vulnerable and are susceptible to PFOS contamination. We have been working with several areas in our state to address PFOS concerns in private wells. In these locations, we have collected samples, provided guidance on individual treatment systems, and also working with our public water systems that can be a solution to some private well owners with PFOS contamination. Again, the announcement from EPA is important to our work with both public water systems and private well owners. We have links on our PFOS webpage for private well owners who are concerned about PFOS impacting their drinking water. That link is being shared in our informational documents also. Now I would like to turn it over to Doug Kiner, who is the Director of the Drinking Water Protection Division. Doug?
Thanks, Jennifer. I'm going to share my screen real quickly here. Got a few slides that I will go through. Can everybody see this?
Yes.
Okay. We have these slides are going to demonstrate kind of where our water systems stand in relation to the new proposed MCL based on data that we've gathered through our drinking water strategy. And just a reminder of our drinking water strategy and what we've done to date. Phase 1 was in years 2020 and 2021. We sampled all of our surface water systems. Those are the largest systems in the state generally, and any additional wells that serve those systems in our 53 largest groundwater systems. And that phase covered 3.9 million people that were served by those community water systems, which is represents 95% of the population served by community water systems in the state. We're currently in the middle of phase 2. Last year and this year, we've sampled about 300 additional small groundwater systems, or system sources rather, and we have about 200 groundwater sources yet to be sampled. Again, there's a lot more of a number of systems and sources, but it only serves about 5% of the population, so it's very small systems. And we plan to have that completed this year by the end of June. Okay, before I get into the charts that hold the data, I want to give some data limitations. It is based on a single sample. We sampled each water system source a single time, and we, of course, still, as I said, still have some of the small systems yet to be sampled. Okay, I got 4 slides here. It's going to go through groundwater, detections of PFOA and PFOS, and then the same for surface water systems. As you can see, the vast majority of groundwater systems had either non-detect up to below 4 parts per trillion, which is the proposed MCL. We did have a few systems that were in the 4 to 10 range and others in the 10 to 20. I do want to point out there are 2 systems that are listed that are higher than 20 parts per trillion. We have already taken steps to have conversations with those systems to try to eliminate those sources as a source of drinking water in the future, and we are moving in that direction prior to the rule being finalized. Okay, this is just the PFOS, the second chemical that has its own proposed MCL. Again, they're very similar numbers here. We have no outliers in PFOS as we did in PFOA. Everything is under 20 parts per trillion. Surface water, we have a higher number of systems that are between 4 and 10, and 10 and 20 for PFOA. Still, the majority of water systems are in that 0 to 4 range. Now, PFOS in surface water systems, we have a larger number of them, 24 that would be above the proposed MCL. Again, none of the systems exceed 20 parts per trillion. This is just a summary slide. 24 of 55 surface water plants or systems have results between 4 and 10 parts per trillion. That's 43.6%. We've had 2 that's between 10 and 20, and no results over 20 parts per trillion. For groundwater systems, we have a higher number, but a lower percentage of systems that are between 4 and 10 parts per trillion. 41 sources for 6.6% of those that we have sampled to date. 9 sources were 10 to 20, 1.5%. We did have those 2 sources that are above 20 parts per trillion. And again, we have 200 sources approximately yet to be sampled. And that concludes the prepared slides.
I got you, Doug. Thank you so much, and Myra and Jennifer for those remarks. Also, before we get to our open Q&A session, we do have a hard stop at 1:30. We do have pre-submitted media questions, and we're going to go ahead and start with those. The first question that we have is, will utility companies that manage public drinking water systems need to alter their filtration practices to reduce the amount of PFAS in consumable water? Doug, you want to take that?
Yes, Ron, thank you. Yes, if a water system exceeds a maximum contaminant level, then they will either have to add treatment to the process, or smaller systems may have the option of abandoning that source and going to a separate source of water, a different alternate source.
We had a few questions we're going to kind of combine into one. Now that the EPA proposed these standards, what are the next steps for DHEC in South Carolina? How does this new standard get implemented in our state?
Okay. Yes. Well, EPA has come out and said, and we agree that we're not requiring anybody to take any action until the rule is final. We don't know that that the rule as proposed is going to be the final rule or the final level for these PFAS compounds. We have been working with water system. We shared our data with them, and we've encouraged them to be looking forward, assuming that this may end up being the final level, and taking necessary steps now to plan for the future. There are several pots of money or funding available through the state revolving fund and other areas that would be dedicated to specifically for contaminants of emerging concern such as PFAS. And we're encouraging water systems that may have to install treatment to look at that as a funding source and to begin making plans for long-term when the rule becomes final.
Thank you for that. Our next question is, waterways in the state's PD region saw levels of PFAS and Gen X. Should homeowners take action, or will utility companies filter this out? Rob, you want to take this?
Yeah, sure. It's not just in the PD region. We're seeing PFOS and Gen X across the state in various levels in all of our waterways. What we're doing right now is currently collecting ambient surface water information. We've got a program that should be wrapping up by the end of the summer, where we're taking samples on each part of the seasons, and we're using that data along with the drinking water data to help us determine the extent of the constituents statewide, and hopefully this will allow us to identify priority locations, try to determine probable causes, and work on a way of protecting the drinking water sources down the road.
Thank you, Rob. Our next question is, for people who get their drinking water from private wells, what does this new proposed PFAS standard mean for them? Jennifer?
Thank you, Ron. We do not regulate private wells, but we are here for private well owners as a resource. And as I mentioned in my earlier comments, on our DHEC webpage, there is a link, and we are, able to sample private wells. And then if we have vulnerable wells that are showing PFOS contamination, we'll be able to work with those private well owners and give them some avenues of what options they have to treat it. Because like we said, there are some filter units that you can use, and also public water systems that are close by may be a viable option for private well owners too. So we are a definitely resource for our private well owners, and we hope they will reach out to us if needed.
Thank you for that. Our next question is, what is the current recommended water filtration process that DHEC advises water utility companies to perform to make water drinkable? Doug?
Yeah, there are actually several different technologies available to remove PFAS from drinking water. Generally, water systems will evaluate all the options available and pick one that suits them the best. And also, ongoing research into removing PFAS from water is ongoing, and it's developing every day, that science. And but that is generally going to be something that's going to be the choice of the water system to determine what's their best option.
Thank you for that, Doug. And our final pre-submitted question is, should we be worried? Fran?
Thank you. We don't want people to be worried or concerned. We want you to be informed. We want the public to be informed. Remember, as Jennifer mentioned earlier, this is a chronic concern, and you could argue that the process of setting MCLs is also a chronic or long-term process. It takes a while to get these things done. Nothing has changed over the last weeks, months, or years, except that we know more today than we knew yesterday, and that trend will continue. We will continue to learn more. Once we learn about even potential risks, we should all take actions to reduce our exposures or reduce our risk. Remember, as Jennifer mentioned again earlier, 20% of our exposure comes from drinking water, 80% consumer products. So there are things we can do to reduce our exposure, and you can look at our DHEC PFAS website to find some resources that will help you out with that. And again, I just want to remind you, knowledge is not a static thing, especially in our field. We're going to learn more and more as time goes on, and we will do the responsible thing and change as we need to change our recommendations.
All right. Thank you so much for that question. Before we get to our live questions here, I just want to remind everybody that if you do have a question, please raise your virtual hand, and I'll recognize you in the order you raised it. Out of fairness, I'll try to get to everyone interested in asking questions first before I come back for follow-ups, as we have our hard stop. And I'll also add that a recording of today's briefing will be available later this afternoon on our agency YouTube page. Tina Terry, go ahead with your question.
Tina Terry, WSOC TV. Thank you for taking my question. I have a really simple questions for you. When you talk about the data summary, and you said PFOA and PFOS, explain the difference between those two. And then can you also talk about surface water plants? When you say surface water plants, what specifically are we referring to? Is that another word for a a water provider, for example, you know, in the city of Charlotte, which obviously is not in South Carolina, but Charlotte Water or Rock Hill Water in Rock Hill, South Carolina? What is a surface water plant?
Okay, thanks. The PFOA and PFOS are just the two most studied long-chain PFAS compounds that were used for a long time, but they have been, the manufacturer have been banned in the United States or they were voluntarily phased out, actually, by the manufacturers several years ago, but they are the ones that have been most studied. Surface water treatment plant, that's a public utility, drinking water utility that uses surface water and treats surface water to make drinking water.
Tina, do you have any follow-ups to that?
I do, actually. So when we say that 24 of 55 have results between 4, I believe that's parts per trillion, and 10 parts per trillion, or 43.6%, what does that mean in light of the new EPA guidelines? Are those facilities beyond the new guidelines? Are they below the new guidelines?
Yes, if 4 parts per trillion ends up being the final MCL, when the rule is finalized, then all of those systems above 4 would be required to install treatment to remove those compounds to below the MCL at 4 parts per trillion.
Thank you for that question, Tina. Tina, we'll come right back to you. I want to give Sammy a chance. Sammy, go ahead.
Yeah, I had a question, guys. Trying to figure out your test data. When was what time period does this test data cover? I know you had initially some stuff done in 2020. So what period of time does this cover?
Phase 1, which was the largest water systems in the state, was completed in 2020 and 2021. We're still in the process of sampling the smaller water systems, and that should be wrapped up by end of June this year.
So all the data is for 2020 and 2021, correct?
The majority of it. Water systems may have their own data that's more recent than that, but that's when our data was collected on the large water systems.
Okay, one other question. Do you expect to find PFAS in more water systems as you finish this up?
They're just based on percentages, there may be some additional detections with the 200 sources that we're yet to sample.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Sammy. Tina, go ahead.
Thank you so much. So going back to the numbers that were presented there, when you say 24 out of 55 have results between 4 and 10, and then two sources have results between 10 and 20, how do we find those specific surface water plants? Are they listed by name on your website somewhere? Is there a link that you all can send to us with the specific names of those surface water plants that have been tested so far and what their scoring was?
Yes, that information is available on the website.
Send a link.
Yeah, and we can send you a link to that, Tina. And at this point, we are out of time, but before we leave, I want to make sure that I give Myra the chance to kind of wrap things up, and also add that if you have any follow-up questions to anything you've heard today, please send an email to media@dhec.sc.gov, and we'll be happy to get any information or any slides or anything that you saw today that you would need. We'll be happy to provide, and I'll turn it over to Myra.
All right, thank you, Ron. And just a few comments before we close out. I just really appreciate the questions and just the amount of focus that you are focused on this issue and asking questions to get the information to share with the public. I do want to say over the next probably 60 days or so, in addition to, continuing to send teams of folks out in the field to continue the testing of our water systems and our lakes and streams, identifying areas of elevated concentrations, and taking advantage of the federal and state resources we have to mitigate and correct those impacts. We will be reviewing the scientific basis of the proposal and other requirements of the Safe Drinking Water Act, such as the technology feasibility, the economic impacts, and implementation challenges. That's one thing that EPA really depends on the states and really the water providers and all stakeholders to take a close review of the proposal, so when it's finalized, it can be the best rule moving forward. It's from an implementation perspective. And we just want to say also to our water providers who are showing a lot of leadership, and so many other industries in South Carolina that are doing some things voluntarily to go ahead and reduce the impacts of these chemicals to our water bodies. So we will have plenty of continued conversations. I believe our next media briefing, we're thinking about, again, trying to stay on the time frame of 3 weeks or so. And probably at the next briefing, we will start sharing some information. We're collecting a lot of data, which we refer to as our ambient surface water data, and go ahead and let you know some of the observations and conclusions and even additional hypotheses that we're forming by looking at that data. So we look forward to continuing this dialogue with you. Thanks again. We greatly appreciate the business that you're in, the great work that you do in helping us get the word out about these chemicals and ways that they can take actions while we continue to solve this problem to reduce their exposure. Have a great evening or afternoon, everyone, and we'll talk soon.